Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me on drsue.ca. That's drsue.ca. Today, we're talking about if we skip measuring waist, how many people with obesity will we miss? As I blogged previously, making the diagnosis of obesity traditionally meant doing a simple calculation based on weight and height called the body mass index or BMI. But the BMI has limitations. It doesn't tell us anything about body composition, how much is fat versus muscle, nor fat distribution. Is the fat under the skin, or is it the central or visceral fat in the abdomen and around the organs? Some people who don't meet the BMI threshold for overweight or obesity do actually have excess central body fat, which is really important to identify because it's that central fat that is associated with obesity related metabolic diseases like cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So, the diagnosis of obesity can now be made not only with BMI, but also with waist circumference, waist to height ratio, and or waist to hip ratio. So, a recent study asked, how common is obesity using these expanded criteria? This was a national US Institute of Health database study of over 300,000 adults participating in the All of Us research program enrolled between 2017 and 2023. They found through this NIH study that according to the old definition of obesity, which was the ethnicity specific BMI, the prevalence of obesity was 43%. Using the new definition of obesity, including waist based measures, the prevalence of obesity was actually 69%. Said another way, 25% of the entire US adult population studied met waist based criteria for obesity despite a non elevated BMI, and they would have been missed if their waist hasn't been measured. Men and older people were more likely to fall under the BMI cutoff but fit the diagnosis of obesity by waist based measures. Looking at ethnicity, the highest jump in obesity prevalence was seen in Asian people, from 27% using the old BMI criteria to 51% using BMI and waist based measures. People with obesity, by any definition, had a higher risk of other weight related conditions like cardiovascular disease, liver, kidney, arthritis, reproductive, and diabetes, things like that, compared to people without obesity. Those who met BMI and waist based criteria had the highest risk, but those with waist only obesity had an elevated risk as well, using only those waist based measures to make the diagnosis. Also, an important note, only 0.2% of people in the study who met the BMI criteria for obesity no longer met criteria for obesity when waist based measures were included. So these are the rare people who have elevated BMI due to higher muscle mass and do not actually have excessive body fat. So they do not have obesity. So, the bottom line here is that in making the diagnosis of obesity, it's high time that we look beyond BMI in assessing for excess body fat, which means including waist based measures in our assessment. In this American study, skipping the waist based assessment missed the diagnosis of obesity in 25% of the entire population. People with elevated waist based measures have an increased risk of weight related health conditions, so it's really important not to miss the diagnosis of obesity in these people. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe to my blog, drsue.ca.